The wind crawled across the dust-heavy yard like it had nowhere else to go, carrying with it the scent of rusted iron, dried lilac, and something sharper blood, perhaps, or sorrow. The evening light filtered through the cottonwoods in gold slants, soft as a hymn, but the sounds that echoed through the air were anything but gentle. A slap cracked against the quiet, like the crack of a pistol, and the chickens scattered. Clara. May Whitlow didn't cry out. She'd learned not to. Her body took the blow with the practiced dullness of something already half broken, shoulders absorbing the brunt as her husband's father, Ephraim, cursed her again. 6 girls, he spat, backing away, as if her presence alone offended him. 6 mouths, and not a boy among 'em. You've cursed this house, Clara. You've shamed us. The smallest of her daughters, Fern, whimpered from the shadows of the coop where all 6 girls crouched together like a clutch of frightened fawns. Clara turned just slightly, enough to see them, to give them the barest nod that meant, stay, quiet, still, alive. Mabel Whitlow stood at the porch steps, arms crossed. Over her apron, face drawn into a sneer as rigid as sun-baked clay. Maybe, if you weren't so big, she hissed, God would have given you sons, instead of a herd of useless girls. Clara said nothing. Her lip bled, her knees shook, but she kept her feet. There was dignity in that, or so she told herself. The town of Gritwillow wasn't blind, but it was indifferent. Folks had seen the bruises before, the way Clara walked with her eyes downcast, and her children never spoke above a whisper. But nothing changed. The preacher's wife once left a basket of preserves on their porch without knocking. That was the closest anyone had come to kindness. So when Boone Calder rode into town that afternoon, saddle creaking beneath him and dust clinging to the hem of his coat, no one thought much of it. He was a quiet sort, broad in the shoulders, slow in speech, and with eyes the color of storm water that had seen too much and said too little. He came once a month for nails, flour, and tobacco, sometimes whiskey, though not often. But this time, Boone saw the girls first. They were gathered in the shade behind the broken barn, half hiding, half hoping. Hazel held a sliver of cloth to Fern's mouth to hush her crying. Ruthie, the eldest, at 12, had the hollow-eyed look of a child who'd memorized every creak of a bad man's boots. Boone reined in his horse. His gaze followed the line of the fence to the woman slumped near the trough. He didn't see her face, just the shape of her, broad and bent, hair coming loose from its braid, a hand pressed to her ribcage like she was holding herself together with it. He dismounted slow. Ephraim turned, noticed him, and scoffed. Ain't your concern, Calder? Boone didn't answer right away. His boots sank into the dirt as he walked toward Clara. He passed her daughters without a word, but one of them reached up and brushed his coat. He paused, looked down. It was Junit years old. Maybe. She didn't speak either, just looked at him, her eyes rimmed red, and held out a tiny daisy with a petal torn. Boone took it, put it in his coat pocket. Then he kept walking. Clara didn't see him until he was nearly beside her. She flinched just slightly, as if expecting another blow. Her hand tightened on the trough. Boone stopped. The wind curled around them both, stirring her torn shawl in the dust in equal measure. You're coming with me, he said, his voice as calm and final as a church bell. She blinked up at him, dazed. What? You? The girls? I've got a wagon. Ephraim barked a laugh behind him. You lost your damn mind, Calder. Boone didn't turn. His voice dropped even lower. Don't reckon I asked you. Clara tried to rise but faltered. He didn't touch her, just crouched nearby, not crowding her, not rushing her. I can't, she whispered. I got no right. Nowhere to go, nothing to offer. Boone tilted his head slightly, studying her with those pale, steady eyes. That true. She looked away. Behind them, the girls watched like birds, afraid to move. No one breathed. I got 6 mouths to feed, she said hoarsely. I got land. Hands could use help. I ain't pretty. I ain't small. I ain't what you're looking for." Boone stood. "Didn't say I was looking." And then he turned, walked back to his horse, pulled a rolled blanket from the saddlebag, and handed it to Ruthie. He said only, "For the little one." Then he mounted and rode off, the dust curling behind him like smoke from a long burning fire. Clara stayed kneeling beside the trough, staring after him as if he'd spoken in a tongue she'd forgotten she used to know. That night, the girls huddled close under Boone's blanket. It smelled of cedar and ash and something else, something clean. Clara sat awake by the hearth, sewing the same seam she'd sewn 3 times, unpicking it every time because her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Outside, the wind had calmed. The sky turned bruised violet and then indigo. She didn't look at the door, not really, but her ears were tuned for hoofbeats. She didn't believe in miracles. She hadn't in a long time. But that night, as her daughters drifted to sleep wrapped in the warmth of a stranger's kindness, Clara May allowed herself one small, dangerous thought. What if she said yes? She looked at her hands, calloused, raw, cracked from years of cooking, scrubbing, stitching, hands that had caught every daughter she'd birthed alone in a cold room, hands that had learned to make do. She pressed them together and whispered a prayer with no words, just before dawn. As the first blush of light touched the rim of the hills, she opened the door and stepped outside barefoot. The chill kissed her skin. Her heart beat like it hadn't in years. The blanket had shifted in the night. She tucked it tighter around her girls. And then she walked to the edge of the yard, where Boone had stood. The dust held his boot prints like a secret. And for the first time in a long time, Clara May didn't feel small. She felt paused, like maybe her story hadn't ended with those 6 girls and those bruises. Like maybe, just maybe, something was about to begin. She didn't know what lay down that trail, but she knew who had offered her a hand without taking anything, and that had to mean something. The road out of Grit Willow was little more than a bruised trail, carved through sagebrush and sun-bleached rock. The kind of road no one took unless they were running from something or toward something they weren't yet ready to name. The morning Clara May left, the wind had softened to a hush, like even the prairie itself was holding its breath. She didn't wake the girls all at once. She moved quiet, touching each shoulder with care. "Dress now, babies," she whispered. "Don't make a sound." The fire was already dead, but she didn't dare light another. She wrapped them in shawls and coats 2 sizes too small, and gathered what little she owned, a skillet, to hair ribbons, a pair of cracked boots. By the time the sun crested the hills, they were already walking. Boone Calder was waiting, not at the house, not at the edge of town, but a half-mile up the trail, just where the cottonwoods thinned and the land opened wide. He sat atop his horse like he'd been there an hour, reins loose in one hand, his face unreadable as a desert stone. Behind him, a flatbed wagon waited, dulled but sturdy, lined with hay and covered with an oilskin tarp that flapped in the wind. He didn't speak when he saw them. Clara counted her girls, looked back once, not for regret, but to be sure nothing. Followed. Boone climbed down, nodded once, and offered her a hand, not as a man offering rescue, but as one offering shared labor. She didn't take it, not yet. Instead, she lifted Fern onto the wagon, then Lila, then the others. Her arms ached before she even reached June, but she did it herself. She needed to. Boone didn't press her. He only helped her up last, offering her a box to sit on and turning the reins forward with a click of his tongue. The wheels rolled forward like the start of a slow hymn. The first day was silence. Boone didn't ask questions. Clara didn't offer answers. The girls clung to each other in the back, too exhausted to talk, too wary to play. The only sound was the steady creak of the wagon and the occasional rustle of Boone's coat when he adjusted in the seat. But on the second morning, something shifted. Clara woke early, frost biting her sleeves. Boone had already built a small fire and was boiling something in a blackened tin pot. He handed her a mug, something dark and bitter that burned her tongue but warmed her chest. He looked away when she drank, as if pretending the moment wasn't. Shared later, when the wheel cracked on a gopher hole, Boone knelt beside it, hammer in hand, and motioned Ruthie over. He showed her how to hold the axle steady, how to drive a pin back in without splintering the wood. He didn't praise her when she got it right, just nodded and handed her the next nail. Clara watched from the wagon, fingers knotted in her lap. The days passed like that. Small things. Boone giving Hazel his scarf when the wind picked up. Teaching Lila to find water by watching where the grass grew thickest. Whispering a story to Fern about a coyote who stole fire from the stars. He never touched Clara. Never asked why she left. Never questioned what her in-laws might do when they found her gone. But on the fourth night, by a stream tucked behind a ridge of red rock, Clara spoke. "My middle name's Rose," she said softly, turning a piece of bread over the coals. "My mama gave it to me 'cause she said I had cheeks like flower petals when I was born." Boone didn't look up from where he was sharpening a blade. "Rose suits you." Clara smiled. Small, faint, but real. "You were married?" she asked. He nodded. "She died to Winter's back. Fever took her fast." "I'm sorry." He glanced at the fire, eyes dark. "She'd have liked your girls." That was all they said. But something bloomed between them that night. Not romance, not yet. Just recognition, to people who had carried too much for too long. Now learning how to share the weight. The next morning, Ephraim Whitlow arrived. He wasn't alone. 2 men rode with him, one wiry and mean-eyed, the other tall with a rifle slung across his back. They came down the trail hard, horses foaming at the mouth, dust kicking up like a storm. The girls screamed. Clara stood in front of them before Boone could even move. "Give em back," Ephraim snarled, dismounting with a heavy thud. "You think you can just steal off with what ain't yours? You're sick in the head, Clara. You don't get to just run." "I didn't steal nothin'," she said, her voice low. "I left what was killing me." The rifleman took a step forward. Boone moved then slowly, like molasses sliding from a tin, but with intent. He stood between them and the girls, his frame casting a long shadow across the camp. "You don't want to do this," Boone said, his voice calm. Ephraim spat. "You some kind of hero now, Calder. You think she's worth the trouble? Look at her. She's nothing but weight and weakness and mouths to feed." Clara didn't flinch this time. She stepped forward. "She gave you everything," she said. "Her body, her health, her babies. You beat her, starved her, humiliated her, and still she stayed. You don't get to say her name now. You don't get to call her nothing." Boone's hand hovered near his coat, but he didn't draw. "You got 2 choices," he said. "You ride back, or you bury your pride out here." The rifleman glanced between Boone and Ephraim. Something passed between them, something cold and calculating. Then the tall man lowered his gun. "She ain't worth it." "Ephraim," he muttered. "Let it lie." Ephraim seethed, but Boone's eyes never left his. "Go," Boone said, and they did. Dust curling behind them like smoke off a dying fire. Clara stood there long after they were gone. The girls ran to her. She pulled them close, burying her face in their hair. Boone sat back down by the fire, unbothered, as if he'd just told a man he was out of sugar. That night, there was music, not from a fiddle or a mouth harp, just Hazel, humming under her breath, soft and tuneless but warm. Ruthie told Fern a story. Clara sat beside Boone, closer than before, still not touching, but her shoulder brushed his once, and she didn't pull away. "You weren't scared," she said. "I was," he replied. "What of you not believing it could be different?" She didn't answer, but her hand moved slightly, fingers brushing the hem of his coat. Just once, when the fire burned low and the stars came out in full. Clara tucked her daughters in and stood at the edge of the ridge, looking out at the prairie wide open, waiting. She wasn't free yet, but she wasn't afraid anymore, and that was the beginning of something. She turned, found Boone still awake, watching her with quiet eyes, not claiming her, not asking anything, just there, and she smiled for real this time, a smile that said, "Maybe I'll stay. Maybe I'll build something here. Maybe I'm not done." The stars blinked down like old friends, and somewhere far behind them, Grit Willow forgot her name, but out here, under the clean sky, and beside the man who'd seen her first, not as a burden but as a whole woman, Clara May, Whitla Rose began to remember who she was, and who she might yet become.